Hello, everybody. This is Rob Fredette with the podcast HODGEPOD, and joining me on this episode is Alan Maas. He's an author, researcher, tour guide. He lives in South Dakota, and looking forward to learning about South Dakota, but just other stuff about he's written books as well. He's dedicated to telling forgotten stories of the American West. He's an author, researcher, and tour guide. And Alan Maas, welcome to my podcast HODGEPOD. I'm looking forward to having you on, and welcome.
Thank you, Rob. Again, my name's Alan Maas. You can call me Al, it says, as the song goes. I've been a lifelong resident of South Dakota and also pretty much an advocate of it, just because, I've traveled a lot of places in the world, and this is where I call home. But I did grow up in the eastern part of the state, and we were talking earlier that you were kind of wondering what the state was like. I've always said there's like two parts of the state, divided right in the middle with the Missouri River. The reason for it is that there was a glacier on the eastern part, and the western part was really never touched for about 50 million years. So there's just a lot of geography differences. There's a lot of climate differences. It's hot, muggy, buggy in the eastern part of the state. Here we don't have so much humidity. It's usually kind of a really temperate climate. And I guess that's not as many bugs. So that's kind of why I'm still here.
You said 50 million years. That boggles the mind. That is an unbelievable amount of time. And I'm here in Memphis, and we're in the high 90s. We got humidity. It feels like it's 105. So that's okay. I'll deal with that. Just drink a lot of water. So before we got on, I just wanted to learn a little bit about South Dakota. It's the 40th state and became the 40th state on November 2nd, 1889, also known for Mount Rushmore. It's the 16th largest state in size, 46th in population. Pierre is the state capital, and the largest city is Sioux Falls. Talk about, first of all, Mount Rushmore, because that is a great tourist attraction. I would like someday to get there. So talk about that, about how the people congregate there to see Mount Rushmore.
Well, matter of fact, I just came from there today. I had a tour,
Cool.
morning tour. And usually that's the highlight out here is Mount Rushmore. Over 3.5 million people come to see Mount Rushmore. The interesting fact is that they spend on about an hour there, and then they're looking for something else to do. So today I did the monuments tour, which ended up being both Mount Rushmore and Crazy Horse. But then we also did the Custer State Park, and we did a couple of lakes around the area. And I kind of zoomed in on a couple of old mines to show them while we were touring. But Mount Rushmore, I never get sick of going there. It's absolutely fantastic, magnificent, whatever you call it. It just, for taking 14 years to build something like that and having the depth and when you look at it, you just go, how could that happen? How could they take basically just dynamite and build that?
Wow.
I mean, dynamite down to 2 inches of finish. I mean, for me, I'll say I have to do things twice. Third time I can get ticked off at it. But I have to do things twice, but you pull that trigger and the nose gets blown off. I mean, how do you start over?
That is amazing. 15 years to build or put it together. That's unbelievable. And again, you said over 3 million people visited. One day I like to go visit there. It's a American icon historical area. So talk about, you also have authored some books, if you would, the Kind Legacy series of books. You have 2 books on that, the Kind Whisper and the Kind Redemption. So talk about that, because it's kind of tied into South Dakota.
Yeah, very much so. So it kind of boils down to when I first came out here to working for Pope and Talbot as one of their foresters, and I started gathering a lot of stories from some of the ranchers and people who lived in the area. Now that was many years ago, and I was just kind of trying to figure out. I was actually building my house and living in my camper, starting to freeze my ass off, and decided I better write something instead of staying up all night. So I started gathering all these stories together, trying to figure out how I was going to piece them all together. Well, I based it around a mystery that's still a mystery to this day. And it's about the Thorn Stone. And the stone was found in 1889 or 1887, sorry, by Lewis Stone, who was a stonemason building buildings in Spearfish, South Dakota. And on the stone, it had came to these hills in 33, the seven of us, names off all seven of them. And then it says, the guns and ponies Indians got, now they're hunting me. Now, that mystery was never solved. And there was a lot of talk about how authentic it was back in the 1950s, because that would have proven that the gold was found in South Dakota way before California.
Hmm.
So there's just a lot of mystery behind how that secret was kept. Now, like I said, gold was not found officially in the Black Hills until 1874 when Custer's expedition came through. And that's what I based my book on. I started with it was a Solemn Stone, a little bit of a mystery. I'd go into Custer's expedition, which spent 3 months out here in the Black Hills, and it was the first expedition to even find the Black Hills. That nobody even really knew it was here.
Uh-huh.
Uh, there's my theory, and I know it's right because it's my theory, is that when Lewis and Clark came up the Missouri River, they bypassed this area going all the way up into the Little Missouri, and then it's kept on going over into, and finding the Pacific Ocean. It was a major corridor. It was a major river it was easier to travel. So people kept going up there. But if you're curious, people jumped off and were going to see what was west of the Missouri River. They ran into the Badlands. And the Badlands are exactly what they sound like. There's just nothing there. Nothing really grows really well. And it's a vast area that's really the terrain is hard to bring wagons or anything across.
Mm-hmm.
Even hiking is tough. So I believe they bypassed it because they ran into the Badlands and really didn't know what was beyond there. Now, the Black Hills is a little oasis. It's absolutely gorgeous here. If you ever look up pictures of the Black Hills, you'll see so many gorgeous things out this way. And like I said, it's like a little oasis out in the middle, or right on the western edge of South Dakota. And when gold was found here, that was when kind of all hell broke loose and treaties were broken. There was massive amount of people coming out here. They were, obviously after the gold. And that's what broke open the Black Hills. And that's when a lot of these legends were made about Wild Bill Hickok, about Calamity Jane, about Seth Bullock, even a lot of stuff about Teddy Roosevelt in this area.
While you were talking about the Badlands, I just went on my phone here, and yeah, it looks pretty. It looks like a planet, like a planet out in the universe. It's just like you said, Badlands. It is what it says it is. That must have been horrible terrain. So back when like the expeditions, Lewis and Clark, or when people were looking for gold, did they travel along the river? Was that like a main corridor?
Yeah, so that was the main corridor that when Lewis and Clark came up and discovered, this part when Jefferson had the expedition explore the Louisiana Purchase, they came all the way up through the Missouri River. And there was a lot of trappers and traders and stuff that were out here, but there were so many things that kept people out. I mean, there was Indian attacks. There was the fact that, again, running into the Badlands, it was unknown and if it was even going to be a place to. Now, I'll back it up a little bit and I look at my ancestors and I think about, okay, what possessed them to get off that boat? And they got off, and people told them, if you go west, you're going to die. And they still left. They still went west. Now, I joke about the fact that my ancestors didn't go like to Bahamas and put a claim there, but they came to a place where they were familiar. I mean, being from Norway, Germany, those areas, they looked at South Dakota where they actually ended up homestay as a familiar place they could farm. And so it's the people that kept pushing west that finally discovered the Black Hills. And with that, like I said, it was opened up. Custer came through with his expedition. He brought a photographer with him called Ellingsworth. Ellingsworth took tons of pictures of all the area, and they took specimens back. And he announced to the world that this place was pretty phenomenal. And that kind of cut the string that invited everybody to start flowing into here. But that was also part of the 1868 Laramie Treaty that was made by the government with the Sioux Indians. So that treaty, and they just opened it up, and they couldn't hold back the people that were coming into this area.
Well, you mentioned Custer. Is that General Custer?
Yep, General George Custer.
Wow. So talk about that. Was he in that area?
He spent a lot of time in this area, and then he died pretty close to about 2.5 hours from there in the
Huh?
Bighorn. So yeah, he love him or hate him. You know, a lot of the research that I've done on him, my stance on it is that General Custer was a very arrogant person, but he was also very driven by his military expertise. He was not in favor of drinking, smoking, all that. He was a kind of a straight-laced guy dealing with military things and driving that point home. So, you know, you had some of his officers that liked him, others didn't. General or President Grant didn't like him so much. He kind of demoted him. But I honestly believe if he wouldn't have been killed, he would have, his ambitions were pointing towards trying to be president.
Wow. That's amazing. When you mentioned that, I was wondering if that was, and I looked up before we came on, Custer Last Stand. Was that in Montana?
Yeah, I was up in Little Bighorn.
Okay. Wow. That's that. So talk about the land there. What, I mean, when you did research and things like that, did you look up, was there any newspaper articles or accounts of things that happened? Were there photos that you looked at? And if you looked at photos from the 1800s to now, have things changed or do they look the same?
Well, it's a really good question, and yes, the answer is yes because of the fact that there's been a lot of people that have kind of put that interest first. Number one, I've followed Custer's Trail through the hills.
Hmm.
That's what got me going on this, and I can tell you the story that started it all was when I was doing a timber sale on the western edge of South Dakota here with a rancher that told me I would find the boundary of his land. The western boundary is marked by blaze trees. And I was young and cocky enough not to ask questions and thought I could figure it out. So I went looking for these blaze trees and I came back with my tail between my legs and said, I don't understand what you're talking about. So he leads me out there. He points up about 6 feet up on 6 to 8 feet up on a tree and shows me this mark on the tree. And he says, this is a blaze tree. And it looks just like somebody took a chunk out of the tree. He goes, you find the next one down a little further, next one down a little further. And he said, these are the blaze trees that General Custer's men put in. We're talking 100, at that time, 20 years ago, 130 years ago. And I'm like, wow, this doesn't seem possible. And he said, yep, these are what he called the pilgrims. They would come out and they would try to figure out how to get the wagon train through because he came through here 150 years ago with 100 wagons, 1,000 men, and his own band.
What?
And he marched them all the way through 3 months worth of going through 2,000 miles worth of terrain that never been traversed with wagons or anything before. And so these pilgrims would go out and they would take an axe on their horse and they would try to find a route for the wagons to get through. So they would take a chunk out of the tree.
Wow.
If you do it at a ponderosa pine, which I'm going to back up and explain something, like the Black Hills are called the Black Hills because the ponderosa pine looks black from a distance, which is the prominent tree out here. And it is the commercial tree that they use for lumber. So they took a notch out of the tree and then they would take a notch again. So when you notch it out, it exposes the cambium and it's really a white kind of a yellow look. So
Huh.
you really see it. So again, these are things that we learn what happened. Blaze a trail.
Yeah.
That's where the terminology comes from. Blaze a trail. You're blazing the trees, you're following the trees, you're following your trail. And so that's what really got me fired up about the fact that there's a lot of history out here that nobody knows about and nobody really follows. And that's what started me down this trail. Now I've found Custer's name on 2 mountaintops, carved in stone.
Mm.
Not to say that he probably did it, but his name is in the stone and it's dated for 74 when he came through here. So and I found other artifacts pertaining to their trail coming through here. And last year was the 150th year since they came through the Black Hills.
Wow. I live in West Tennessee. I live in Memphis, and my wife and I went to Shiloh up in here in Western Tennessee, the Battle of Shiloh in the Civil War. And we were there, and you could see pictures from the 1800s of like soldiers that took pictures there. And you look at it, looks exactly the same, just some of the areas, the rocks and things like that. It's just the historical things, how things just stay the same over hundreds of years is quite remarkable. And so the blaze tree there, so that it's still seen to this day, those markings.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll notice, like, if you go out in any national parks, state parks, whatever, they sometimes use that as a way to mark trails for hiking. They'll take a brand. Like, the tree will not overgrow that mark. They will take a cut out of it, and then brand it with a brand like Trail One, and it'll stay there forever. And they don't have to use
Cool. Oh,
plastic markers or whatever. Yeah, there's a lot of cool things about the ponderosa pine, and how the settlers figured out a lot of stuff. One of the cool stories is that they figured out long ago that the ponderosa pine will try to live no matter what you cut off of it. And so they knew if they needed posts, like for fence, they would cut the ponderosa pine off let's say they wanted an 8-inch post. They'd find an 8-inch tree that went up, let's say 10 feet or 8 feet, and they would cut that top off, and they would wait a year, and that tree would pitch. It would pitch out all this sap and basically petrify itself. And then they'd cut the base off and use that as a post. And a lot of these posts are still standing today because they're pretty much petrified from the pitch.
wow. Are there people that look for the art, like the artifacts or the makings of things back then? Are people that actually walk the trails?
There's a lot of people that get excited about this because there is books out there that do show today versus 150 years ago. And they started this over 50 years ago with Illingsworth's pictures. If you look up Custer's Trail, Custer's Expedition, Illingsworth, his photographer, you'll find all these online. And then you can also find comparisons to different years that they went back. And Paul Hurstead, who is one of the authors of these books, which I have right behind me, he would get down to the exact time of day, the exact day, the time of day, everything, and take the same picture in the same spot that Illingworth took. When they first did this, it was South Dakota State University out of Brookings that made this first book to help with understanding how to manage forests, because there was a lot less trees here at that time. And so you look at today's picture and there's so many trees compared to 150 years ago.
So talk about, if you would, your books again that you wrote there. You have two, the series 1 and 2, and how have they been received? And the second one, The Kind Redemption, that just came out recently.
Yeah. So like I said, when I was building my house, I decided to put this together, and it was my first rodeo, and I didn't really know a lot about anything dealing with publishing or anything like that. And so I had some help trying to ask some people things, and I wrote the first book just kind of coming up with an idea. And I explained it. One of somebody who interviewed me came up with a pretty good analogy. They said, it's kind of like Forrest Gump. You got one fictitious character and all the history is true, but you need that character to tie all this history together. So that's what I did with the first book, is I brought this character into it, and I walk you through all this stuff that happens within that time period. And the first book kind of spans the time between 1833 all the way up to 1890 or 1887. And what that does is kind of sets the stage for the next one. And I wasn't really intending on doing the next one, but I had a lot of people say, why did you stop here? So I started writing the second one. And while I was writing that, I came up with a kind of a different writing style. I tell you, one of the hardest things I struggled with was conversations between people. And it was just like, he said, she said, he said, and it redundant, and it just didn't sound right. And I felt like it was kind of like eighth grade trying to put this thing together. And so when I started writing the second one, I established that writing technique and decided to turn it into a series. So I rewrote the first one and combined it with the second one that now is called the Kind Legacy series. And now I'm going to really have to be begged hard for the third one, although I got a lot of stuff in my head. But it churned out a lot faster. It was the second book came to me a lot faster, and I was intending on stopping it at about 20, 21 chapters. I ended up going to 31 chapters because I kept coming up with more things to tie it to. And so that part's fun. It's just when you run out of material, which I hope I don't, that's when you start to struggle.
Yeah, I've talked to authors, I've talked to other folks, filmmakers, but authors, when they write the book, when do you know that chapter's done when you go on to the next one? Did you struggle with that one? And then when you were writing the book, did you ever have like writer's block, or where you had to put it away, or was something always in your head? I gotta put this to pen to paper right now.
Good question. I mean, yes, there's all of that, all the above. I mean, there's been times where I'm just laying in bed and I'm like, holy crap, I got to write this down. And I swim pretty much every morning. So I do a lot of thinking while I'm swimming. And I'll pop out of that pool and I'll get up and I'll start belting it out. So it comes and goes. Yeah, there's sometimes, well, and it's honestly, I like my solitude here in the house, and if I can get the solitude, I can write. If I get distracted, there's too nice out, there's too many things I can do. I get distracted and I can't concentrate on it. But if I get on a roll and there's nobody bothering me, I can churn out a lot of material in a short amount of time. And it's just a matter of how this is all going to go together to make it. And I don't like to write ahead of myself. Like if I'm writing these stories, I want to be able to have this date coincide with this date, go to the next one, and then not like but I do have some stuff that is forward. And I tell myself sometimes, well, go write that because you know what you're doing. You know where you're going with it. But then I don't know, am I going to stumble before I get there?
Mhm.
So, and I did that in the first book. I did it in sections and I went back and I started, and then I really struggled. That's what took me so long to put that one together. The second one, I was very disciplined on to keep going from one chapter to the next chapter. And the hard part is do I end the chapter here
Yeah.
or do I extend it? Or do I just keep moving with this thought? I guess I gauge it on how many pages I've churned out versus how many chapters I have. But I'm in no way a professional at this. It's just one of those things. I keep trying new things and I decide if I'm gonna like it or not.
Yeah. I've talked to authors and of musicians like who write songs, and the one thing I've learned about is the one word is discipline. You got to have discipline to do it. I wouldn't be a good author or songwriter because I'm more of a consumer. I like to read, I like to listen to music. So it's quite fascinating. I love the process of putting things together from start to finish, the grind of it. So that's pretty fascinating. So talk about also, you said you were at Mount Rushmore today. So talk about that. How is it like when you have people, you're giving tours and you're discussing the history of South Dakota? What's that like? Because it must be very easy for you.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going to say. It comes as a natural for me, and I know a lot of stuff about Mount Rushmore too, so that's even better. And I know things about Mount Rushmore that nobody knows, and it's kind of a neat little trick to be able to go up there and take a pair of binoculars and tell them about something that happened up on them, or even describe the things that happened before he even carved it. Like we probably don't know that he started with Jefferson on the other side of Washington's the first one, but Jefferson was on the other side of George, and they found rock was unstable or not good enough for carving. They blew his face off and started him on the other side.
Jeez. Wow. That's amazing. So, how many people do you know? Like, how many people were actually involved in like the building of it? And were there ever any tragedies when it was built?
400 people. They're all inscribed on the wall up there, and not one of them were killed, which is amazing.
That is amazing. And how did they do it? Did they come down on little come down on pulleys, or how did they do like when they?
It was like a zip line in a way, and it was attached to the bottom to the sculptor studio, and they carted themselves up and down. There were stairs too. They had to take stairs and platforms and stuff to get up there. Actually, you probably heard of National Treasure, right?
Mhm.
Treasure 2 was when they were looking for the Hall of Records. And the Hall of Records is behind Lincoln's head. It was never commissioned to actually have Guts of Borglum make that hall. But Gutson, as Custer, was a very arrogant man, wanted everybody to know he did this. So his goal was to have this place for records for the history of the United States, but also to let people know who built it. He did not want to have his work thought of as aliens, like Egypt. So it never got completed until 93. And now it's a titanium box inside the Hall of Records that is with porcelain plates in it that describes the history of the United States and who built Mount Rushmore, sealed in the back. And that's what they were looking for at National Treasure 2.
Oh,
But
wow.
they ended up at Silver Lake, which, by the way, is my favorite lake of all places to see. It's actually spectacular.
What is South Dakota known for? Memphis is known for barbecues, the blues, birthplace of rock and roll, probably a few other things that I'm off the top of my head. What's the food of like the favorite food of South Dakota? What are some things, the norms of out there? Because every state has its own little quirkiness, or their own ways of doing things.
Oh boy. I don't know. I guess you have a lot of genuine people here. They're gonna not, they're gonna tell you exactly how it is, but they're gonna do it in a kind way. So you do have a lot of very genuine, friendly people. We call it, kind of the Midwest nice. And I'll explain again the two differences between West River and East River is that I call West River, I call the East River farmer mentality. The
Mhm.
farmer mentality is, hey, you help me, I help you, we get things done, and life is good. West River is more of a rancher miner mentality, and that's leave me alone, get the hell off my land, and I don't need you around. So So it's two different mentalities. East River, not so much anymore, but that's kind of how it is. And it still is a little bit more of a guarded area out here in the Black Hills because of the fact that it's limited. There's 95% of this area is Forest Service. Us that were lucky enough to find some land to be able to build on it, it's very coveted because there's not a lot of private land to build on. And it's just one of those things that you feel pretty lucky to be in a place that's so pristine and have the people around you that you want to have around you.
Mm-hmm. Talk about too, when I was getting ready for this, the back in the Dust Bowl, did that really affect South Dakota? Because it looks like that did, as well as the Depression. The Dust Bowl was a serious thing.
Well, we got a rabbit hole to go down there because that was, when you talk about climate change and we get on this whole soapbox on deciding what is climate change and whether or not we are affected by it, whether we did it or not. If there's one thing that did start a climate change by humans, it was the Dust Bowl. And that was because I attribute it to the fact that the Homestead Act started it. Because that was when the Homestead Act was put into place. You could, as a U.S. citizen, you could obtain 160 acres of land for basically $15 for the permit. And you had to improve that land in 5 years. So everybody rushed. They didn't even know how to plant anything, but they knew that if they broke that soil, they might be able to plant something. So all of that Midwest area, all the way down to Texas, all that soil was broke, and it exposed all that soil to the air and to the wind. And that's where we got the big dust storms. That's where we got, and before that, basically buffalo roamed that whole entire area.
Hmm.
And the buffalo would graze the land. There was a lot of grass. And their hooves would get down into the wetness when it was raining, and that would trap the moisture, and it kept a lot of this area very arid and growing. But when you broke up the soil, you exposed it, you let that moisture out, and it dried everything up. That is why you saw a lot of conservation efforts after the Dirty 30s, because of you're putting shelter belts in, conservation in farming, understanding how to till. All those things came into effect, but you had all these people coming out here, getting that land and not knowing what they're doing. So if there's one thing that I can attribute, the rest of this climate stuff kind of is BS when it comes to really being tried and true and giving me proof that we're doing cow farts and changing the world here. But that portion did change this section of the land by having human do that kind of stuff to the land, which is there's a host. We could talk about this for a long time, because there's so many things that attributed to the Homestead Act that really bounced this into what we have right now with everybody owning land. One of the things I throw into my books, I talk about the fact that how these ranchers and farmers got so much land back. We're talking 50 to maybe 100 years ago. It was that the smart ones understood that, let's just say, Rob, you were a homesteader. You went out, you got 160 acres of land. You were trying to improve it, but you didn't know squat about it. I did. I had my 160 acres of land. I knew how to grow stuff. I knew how to improve my land. You were coming up on 5 years,
Mm-hmm.
and you're all ready to give it back to the government. I come to you and say, hey, Rob, I'll give you $200 for this. And you're like, sure. It's either I give it away or I get $200. A lot of these guys figured this out, and they started buying up a lot of land. And that's how these big ranches got started. Yeah, they bought some down the road, legitimately just bought land from other people, but they understood. I mean, that was a business move. Let's
Mm-hmm.
buy more land. Let's figure out how we're going to get more land, because I'm going to make this into a huge ranch. I'm going to bring a bunch of cattle in here. I need so much acreage to feed my cattle.
Yeah, it's amazing. You mentioned the gold rush earlier. The gold rush at its peak, how many people were in that area, South Dakota, during its peak? And can you still find gold out there?
Yes and yes. There was a lot of people that came out here. I know in the tens, and I don't even know if you can put a number on, but tens of thousands came out in a hurry. And you could still see remnants of all these mines out here. Matter of fact, I went to one today and I showed some guests where this mine was still, no, I would say probably mined in the 18, maybe early 1900s. And yes, the other thing that's happening right now is a lot of these gold mine companies are coming out here and looking at the tailing piles. The tailing piles are the waste that came from the original mines. And they're looking at these tailing piles, knowing that these companies were very inefficient on understanding how to get the gold out. Now, you have to back up, and this is a misnomer a lot of people have. Gold itself, you're not like finding huge nuggets of gold. It is minute. It's very small. It's mixed in with basically quartz. And that's what they found. If they found a quartz vein, they would follow that quartz vein, see if they could find the gold specks that were in it, and then they had to grind up the gold. They had to grind up the quartz, get into small enough particles, and then put it in cyanide to leach out the.
Oh, wow.
And so the smart miners, they knew. Well, when Custer came out here, he found it in the creeks. Okay, the creeks were full of gold. They called it gold from the roots up, and or roots down. And they were finding it in the creek, and they were like going up. The smart miners would go up the creek until they ran out of gold. Then they would go look for the source, and the source went down in the ground. Now remember, I told you that there was 7,000 feet that eroded off of the Black Hills. That 7,000 feet went through these veins, and it eroded into the creeks. That's how it got down in there. But like I said, smart miners went back up and found out where that gold stopped in that creek, and then they would go after the gold down in the ground. That's when Homestake was formed. Homestake was one of the most successful gold mines ever. It's down 8,000 feet into the ground.
8,000?
8,000. It's an amazing thing to see that layout of how many shafts are down underneath the ground. Now, they quit mining in 2003 because gold prices were down to like $300 an ounce. Now they're 3,000 plus. You think they're thinking about going back after it?
Heck yeah. Man, oh man, yeah. $300 an ounce 20 years ago, 20 some odd years ago.
And now they've actually came to agreement with a lab so that there's a neutrino lab down there at 5,000 feet right now that are studying neutrinos. It's an energy particle. That's a whole nother rabbit hole we can get down.
Wow. Geez, there's so much history there. Gosh. So that they may be reinventing or going back over to see if they can find more. But you said like the gold is really finite. It's not like you watch the movies, these old movies, they're in the river or the creek and they're taking their sifter there and they find gold. It's not like that now, is it?
No, but you can't pan for gold. There is places that people still pan for gold.
Really?
Yeah, find a place and you can stake your claim. What I think it was 1873, the Mining Act was in place, and it's still in place today. So, as a United States citizen, you can place a mining claim any place on federal ground. So, let's just say you walked out here and you're like, "Hey, I think I want to place a claim here." You put the money down, you follow the rules, you can start mining. Now you have to reclaim the land. There's a lot of rules you got to follow, but
Wow.
honestly, that rule is still in place that you can go mine for gold or whatever mineral. There's all kinds. So gold wasn't the only thing found here. There was silver, there was copper, there was tin, and there was lead. There was all kinds of minerals that were found out here. That cauldron that was churning under the earth, solidifying, with all this stuff in it and pushed up.
How cold do winters get up there then? But they must get really frigid, huh?
Well, again, are you going to move here?
No, I grew up in New England, so I know how cold it is, but I think it's colder up there. I grew up in just north of Boston, so I know how cold it gets up in the north. But
We honestly have weather like Denver.
okay,
It'll snow 6 inches and then it'll be 70 degrees. It'll be nice. And it'll be, yesterday I had a tour and this couple was from California and we get these storms in the middle of the afternoon. You just never know where they're going to show up. And I told them that. I said, we're probably gonna have a storm. And we were driving through the Needles Highway and it came down in buckets. And it was kind of cool because there were waterfalls coming off of the cathedral spires and the granite spears. And it was like, went through a tunnel. In the middle of the tunnel, it was like there was an opening and it was like driving through a car wash. It was just coming down. And they were all disappointed because they wanted to go to the lighting ceremony, which is another thing that I want to tell you about. But they were all disappointed. They're like, oh gosh, it's going to be terrible. I go, nope, it'll clear up. And sure enough, it cleared up. And it's so cool to go to Mount Rushmore after it rains because it looks like they're crying. It just, how he formed their faces and their eyes and everything, it looks like they're crying after it rains. And the lighting ceremonies will tug at your patriotic heart every time. It is amazing to watch it. It's just a really cool program they put on at Mount Rushmore every night when they light up the faces.
Does it cost anything to go to Mount Rushmore, or is it
Just parking? It's like $10 to park.
Oh God, that's nothing.
And if you're a veteran, then you get it for free.
Oh, nice. That's awesome. Yeah, it's quite a monument or art historical area for the United States. I heard a radio interview you had on KORN radio recently, Corn Radio. All the radio stations west of the Mississippi begin with a K. What's like radio and TV out like in South Dakota? It's got its own little feel to it.
Well, so the history of the KORN, if you go back and you understand where that the call letters were used on hee
Yeah.
haw. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's that part of that history is that the call letters were used on hee haw, and we talk about that a little bit and joke about it, but yeah, it was fun because I got a lot of local people that follow what I'm doing, and that's how I got into the tour stuff. Is that Carrie, that owns Black Hills Adventure Tours, which by the way is the best tour company out here.
Give it a plug. Give it a plug, please.
So we do tours, all kinds of tours. Anything you want, we can custom do tours. We can do hiking, biking, climbing, anything you want to do out here in the beautiful Black Hills. But that's how I got started on this because Carrie asked me to do a couple of tours and realized I kind of had a little bit of knowledge of the area. And also the fact that we were doing a tour based on my books because you can see, touch, and feel the things that I write about in the books. And the ranches that I wrote about, they're fully restored. The Frawley ranches are fully restored to the 1900s. You can walk in, see the antiques, see the things that go in there. They got a working buffalo ranch right there, a really nice golf course that runs right through the ranch. And it's just a beautiful area right next to Spearfish Canyon and right next to Spearfish, which I think is probably the most beautiful town that South Dakota has to offer for that matter. Just not a bad part of Spearfish.
Are there any old towns, deserted towns in South Dakota or
Lots,
the Midwest?
lots of deserted towns, lots of old gold towns, lots of ghost towns that you can visit. There's ghost tours you can take of the ghost towns. And there's so many old mines, there's so much history out here that it almost betting, Rob, that you can find a connection somewhere into your history that leads out here at some point. Because there's been so many people that came to this area just looking to make it rich. When you come out here, your first thing you're going to do, Rob, especially when you go to Mount Rushmore, you're going to look at the rock and you're going to go, is that gold? Is that silver? I mean, because the rocks just sparkle. And you just, honestly, if you were anybody coming out here and didn't know any better, you would think you were so rich because you just pick up all this stuff. A lot of it's mica, a lot of it's pyrite, but it sparkles and it's spectacular. And you think you're going to be the richest person in the world because it's all here.
Wow,
But I'm talking the people that made the money were not really the miners. They were the hardware store owners, the liquor store owners, the brothels. Those are the people that made money out here. And you can still see it today, that those people still have the money that's the old money that's out here.
yeah. One of the things I follow on the Instagram is people who do like urban exploration, deserted buildings, deserted houses, and just seeing like grocery stores still having groceries out of expired groceries or old racetracks that are totally barren or houses that still have furniture in them. I'm always fascinated by things of the past. That's why I was asking about ghost towns. But if you said that, then that must be a lot of fun. What's one fact? Don't mean to put you on the spot. Maybe one fact that really like startles you or makes you like be amazed by Mount Rushmore. I know you said 400 people worked on it, but what's like one fact that really stands out with Mount Rushmore?
That they used dynamite to get down 2 inches of final product. That just still absolutely blows my mind. They would cut dynamite and go down to 2 inches before they would chisel off the rest of it to make that. And just the fact that they built that 14 years with the people that they had is totally amazing. And if you look at it and you see it and you go, and they didn't really finish what they wanted to do. Guts and Bordeaux kind of wanted to go all the way down to their waists.
That probably was another 14 or 15 years.
Yeah, you're right. And he ended up dying before he finished. And his son was supposed to take over, Lincoln. And he didn't, because I think he didn't want to screw up his dad's legacy. So he just kind of shut it down and started kind of saying it's done. But if you go there, you got to go to the sculpture studio and see exactly what he wanted to build. But he changed the layout at least 9, 10, 12 times because he kept hitting rock that was different. So I'm going to leave you with a little question about if you look at Mount Rushmore, first of all, you look at the presidents and you say, what is chronological here with the presidents? Is it correct? And why or why not? Meaning George Washington's first,
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson, then Roosevelt, then Lincoln. Is that chronologically correct?
I would say no.
No, it's not. Why?
Yeah, what's the reason? That's interesting. I'm looking at a picture right now.
And when he was building, like I said, he was going to have Jefferson on one side and Lincoln on the other. And Teddy was an afterthought in a way, but he still wanted to put him on there. But if you look at the rock, you look at Mount Rushmore, which I'm going to back up a little bit. Do you know why it's called Mount Rushmore?
No.
In 1890, this is way before anybody even thought about building Mount Rushmore or even having it as something that was going to be Mount Rushmore. There was these mines out here, and all these people were trying to figure out who's who and where they're at, and whose mine is what. So then they had to bring in a bunch of lawyers. There was a lawyer out looking at some of the land, and he said, "What's that rock name?" And they said, "There really isn't a name." And he said, "How about we call it Rushmore Rock?" And it stuck. Well, that was Charles Rushmore, who was a lawyer from.
Wow.
So it was called that way before, because there really wasn't. Mount Rushmore got chosen because of its granite, because of its size. And that's why before they wanted to build it in the cathedral spires or in the needles, which were these spires that they were. And Don Robinson, who I'm going to put a plug in for, probably should have got more credit. He was our historian that came up with the idea, but he wanted to put Sacagawea, Lewis and Clark, maybe Sitting Bull, Buffalo Bill Cody. But Borglum talked him out of it by saying, look, we need to have inspiration for the entire United States, not just the Western figures, which I agree with. And that's why we chose those presidents. Now, again, we'll go back to why they're not in chronological order. When he ended up blasting off Jefferson off of well, if you're looking at the faces, it would have been on the left side of George.
Mm-hmm.
He blasted him off of there, and then he put him on the right side of George. And so when he finished with Jefferson's head, he wanted to go to Lincoln, but Lincoln, they ran into some bad rock. And Lincoln was his favorite president. So he wanted to put more of a profile. They wanted to put the face on there more. And they kept going back. They went back 60 feet until they hit solid rock again. And that's where they put Teddy. and then he punched out and found solid rock to put more of Lincoln's head.
Wow. I'm looking at it right now. That's amazing. It is truly, truly awesome. And I think Lincoln, and just looking at the picture here, Lincoln looks like unbelievable. George Washington does. And I like the way Jefferson's like looking off in the distance there. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. Do you see Teddy? Do you see Teddy's glasses?
Yes.
Amazing.
And then they also say the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks, or Mount Rushmore of home run hitters in sports, or the Mount Rushmore of the NBA. They use that analogy. That's the perfect name for those four presidents, right? That's the perfect name.
Yep. So that's yeah. They are the Teddy and George are my two favorites. Teddy number one because he spent a lot of time in this area. Do you know why Teddy came out in this area?
No.
He came out to hunt buffalo.
Wow.
And when he went back east, his wife was giving birth to their daughter, and his mother was really sick. His mother and his wife die on the same day. He's so distraught, he gives up his daughter to his sister and moves out here and says he's done with everything. He gets a ranch. He's going to ranch. He's going to just be out here in the West. And he got pulled back in.
Wow. That's amazing.
He became friends with Seth Bullock. And they became fast friends. And I got stories about that are really cool. Part of those are in my book. All this stuff kind of ties together in my book.
Yeah.
I talk about how these guys met. I talk about how everything gets interwound within the gold rush, within the Indian Wars. All that stuff gets wound up into this series, and that's kind of why. And I wrote them more or less. I was also a teacher at one time, so I always I always taught kids or anybody for that matter. If you can see, touch, and feel it, you're going to remember. And if it's in a story, I'm not a big date guy. I'm not like numbers don't really hang in my head as much. But if you told me a story, I can probably regurgitate that a lot better. And if you put it in a story where I can chronologically understand where these things lie, then I can put it into a perspective of understanding the whole story and getting further down the road. And
Mm.
so that's kind of how I like to teach. And this is what I wanted these books to do. A little bit like Little House on the Prairie. I wanted to tell a story about South Dakota, but I wanted to be able to tell the story to be able to give enough interest to understand that these things happened out here. You probably read the book and go, I can't believe this happened out here. I can't believe that happened out here. But they all did, which is the amazing part.
Where can you get your book? Amazon, right? And it's also on Kindle.
Uh-huh. Yep, it's an Amazon Kindle. Those are the only two I really put it on. Although I did do a audio version of both books, and so that's available on any audio format. And you just look for the Kind Legacy series. So that was an experiment too.
Talk about before we sign off here, the tour company again that you do. And I want to thank you because you came on like right when you got home. And thank you very much. What's the tour company you work for? Because this has been a fascinating hour.
Black Hills Adventure Tours. You can find us online. Like I said, we do a lot of different things anywhere in the hills. We take people over to the Little Bighorn. We'll take people to the Devil's Tower. We'll take them to the monuments. We'll take them to the Badlands. We do kind of a cool tour out with my book, of course, and go through Deadwood and Spearfish Canyon and the Frawley ranches and experience people, kick them back into time and tell them about some of the really bad stuff that happened, but also the really good stuff that happened and how people started homesteading and how people started working together when the railroads came, when the gold mines picked up, shut down. The gold mine here was an amazing story too, because the homestake pretty much took care of their miners so well that they built an opera house. They built places for people to go and recreate and all these different things. And we take you to see all that stuff. And then we talk about it and we try to come to a we try to decide where we fit in this history. And that's what I think it's all about, is people need to understand where they fit in the history and not to repeat some of the bad stuff that did happen and learn from it. Otherwise, if we're not learning from it, then we're just repeating it again.
Yeah, Alan Maas has been my guest today, and I want to thank Alan for jumping on. Also, I want to apologize because we had started the podcast and I did not hit the record button for about 5 minutes, and he was gracious enough. He was very gracious, and we started over. So it was me. I just forgot to hit the record button. But Alan, I want to thank you very much for coming on, and maybe we can connect again because I like to talk more about like the history in the Midwest again, if you would.
Well, I would love to. Like I said, I've done a lot of different things, from construction to having a software company to having a sign company to I just spent a month over in Spain fixing up a 300-year-old building and plan on going back to probably there or Andorra and do more work. So there's a lot of different subjects, a lot of different rabbit holes we can go down. But yeah, I love the history part of stuff and dig into anything when it deals with that kind of stuff. We can even go down some of my philosophies when it comes to where I think history is going. And the fact that I like to tell people, I will listen to any argument that you have to have or have with anything, but you better have a solution. Because if you don't have a solution, you're just part of the problem. So no protesting, no doing any kind of an argument until we talk about the solution. And then we can start to discuss. Otherwise, again, part of the problem.
I agree 100%. Alan, thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice meeting you.